My family secretly gave away my scholarship fund and told me, "You're not college material." Days later, I opened a letter from the admissions office that changed everything. My parents always favored my brother. When I got into my dream college with a full scholarship, they still didn't support me. In fact, they secretly gave away my additional scholarship fund, money meant to support me in college, to my brother's business. They told me flat out that I wasn't college material and needed to stop living in a fantasy. Days later, I received an unexpected letter from the admissions office that not only gave me the financial support I needed, but reminded me I had value, even when my own family didn't believe it. I left home, cut ties, and built a life on my own. But the wound from that betrayal still lingers. "Corinne, college isn't for everyone," my mom said without even looking up from the dish towel she was folding. My heart was still racing from the walk home. I hadn't even sat down yet. "I got in," I said, holding the envelope like a lifeline. "Northwestern. Full tuition." They accepted me. My dad didn't say anything. He just stood by the sink, sipping his coffee, and finally muttered, "Doesn't mean it's the right path." That was the moment I felt the shift. The moment I realized that no matter what I achieved, I'd never be the person they wanted me to be. I grew up in a suburb just outside Pittsburgh. A place with aging shopping plazas, a community rec center that smelled like chlorine and damp socks, and a neighborhood where everyone knew your business within a day. Our house sat on the corner of a cul-de-sac with a cracked driveway and a half-finished porch that my dad had promised to fix for 10 years but never did. My brother, Trent, was the pride of the family. He barely graduated high school, partied too much, and knocked up his girlfriend at 20. Still, my parents funneled every ounce of their time, energy, and money into making sure he landed on his feet. They paid for his HVAC certification, bought him a work truck, and even helped him start his own small business. They called it building his future. They called it practical. Then there was me, Corinne. Quiet. Bookish. I loved to read, write, and disappear into the stacks of our local library. My teachers praised me. I worked harder than anyone else I knew, not because I was smarter, but because I had to be. I applied for scholarships obsessively, wrote heartfelt essays late into the night, skipped parties, and volunteered every weekend. My dream was to study journalism. I wanted to attend Northwestern, one of the best journalism schools in the country. I knew it was a reach, but I applied anyway, trying not to get my hopes up. When the envelope came, I thought things would finally change. But that's not how things worked in my house. My mom told me it was a nice surprise but warned me not to get carried away. My dad barely reacted. Just shook his head and said, "You're not built for that kind of world." Trent didn't even pretend to care. He made a joke about how I'd probably end up crying and broke after the first semester. Still, I was so sure I could make it work. I had the full tuition covered by the university, and I'd also won a $20,000 local scholarship, an outside fund set up by a community donor. It was meant for living expenses, a laptop, travel, winter gear, things that scholarship students often struggle with. The catch? The check had to be co-signed by my parents because I was under 18 at the time I applied. I trusted them with it. About 2 weeks later, I found out they'd given that money to Trent. I wasn't even supposed to know. I overheard my mom on the phone while I was coming downstairs quietly. She was telling someone how the fund helped Trent expand his services into HVAC repair. I felt like the floor had dropped out beneath me. I waited until dinner that night and asked them outright. "Where's the scholarship money? The community fund? It hasn't been deposited into my account yet." My dad looked annoyed. My mom looked guilty, but firm. "It's gone, Corinne. We used it to help Trent invest in the business. You've got tuition, don't you? What more do you need?" I stared at them, speechless. "You stole it. That money was mine. It wasn't yours to touch." "It was never really yours," my dad said with a shrug. "Besides, we just saved you a bigger heartbreak. You're not college material." It's better to figure that out now before you go off and fall on your face. I didn't cry right away. I just left the table, went up to my room, and locked the door. And I didn't come out for a long time. The next few days were a blur. I emailed the admissions office, trying to explain what happened without sounding desperate. I felt humiliated. My parents had undermined me in the cruelest way possible, and I had no way to fix it. I didn't expect a response. But 4 days later, a thick envelope arrived in the mail. My name, handwritten. Northwestern's logo in the corner. Inside was a letter informing me that I had been awarded the Evanston Founders Grant, a special emergency fund reserved for students facing unexpected hardships. It covered everything: room and board, travel, supplies, even a small stipend for incidentals. They had read my email. They believed me. They believed in me. I cried so hard I couldn't breathe. I packed that night in silence. Took only what I needed. My parents didn't ask where I was going, and I didn't leave a note, not until the morning I left. I scribbled something quick and left it on the kitchen counter. You said I wasn't college material. Northwestern disagrees. I boarded a Greyhound to Chicago with 2 bags and my acceptance letter in a folder tucked inside my coat. What followed was both the hardest and most empowering time of my life. I arrived in Chicago on a chilly August morning with $73 in my bank account, a backpack with half-broken zippers, and a heart heavy with both fear and determination. The university had set me up with early housing in one of the older dorms, tucked away behind the journalism building, and I remember standing in that tiny room with the peeling paint, trying to process what had just happened to my life. For the first time in years, no one was telling me what I couldn't do. No one was laughing when I said I wanted to be a writer. No one was calling me dramatic or unrealistic. I was surrounded by strangers who didn't know me as Trent's little sister or the quiet girl with her nose in a book. I was just Corinne. And that was terrifying, but also freeing. But reality didn't wait long to show up. Despite the generous emergency grant, money was tight. I had to stretch every cent. My meal plan was bare bones, and I picked up every odd job I could find. I cleaned classrooms, worked at the campus library 3 nights a week, and even took a weekend gig transcribing audio for a grad student who barely acknowledged me. I studied late into the night, often falling asleep with my laptop still glowing beside me. It wasn't glamorous. My roommates came from families that sent them care packages with baked goods and Amazon gift cards. I lived off ramen and off-brand peanut butter. I couldn't afford the expensive textbooks, so I'd scan pages in the library or borrow from the upperclassmen who took pity on me. Still, I was happy. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who cared about ideas, who debated articles and challenged each other's thoughts. I was pushed harder than I'd ever been, and I rose to it. I started writing again, not just for class, but for myself. I submitted an essay to a campus publication on the quiet isolation of being betrayed by the people who were supposed to protect you. It was raw. I didn't name names, but the emotions bled through every word. To my surprise, it went semi-viral on campus. Professors emailed me. Other students pulled me aside and said, "I felt that too." For once, I wasn't invisible. My parents didn't contact me. Not after I left. Not after the essay. Not even during holidays. And as much as I told myself I didn't care, part of me still looked at my phone more than I should have. Still hoped they'd say something, anything. But silence was all I got. A year passed. I got a job at the student paper, then later an internship at a small but respected local publication. I started doing real reporting, covering community events, university politics, even small city council hearings. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. I felt like I was becoming someone. Then, during a routine research assignment, something strange happened. I was helping one of the editors dig into local businesses that had won city contracts over the past year. It was a small investigation, just making sure everything lined up. We were looking for discrepancies, conflict of interest cases, that sort of thing. We weren't expecting anything major. But then I saw the name. Hathaway Mechanical and Services. A contractor based out of Pittsburgh. Licensed under Keith and Trent Hathaway. I stared at the screen for a long time, heart pounding. It was them. My dad. My brother. Their company. They had won a city contract to perform heating and ventilation upgrades in multiple city-owned buildings. Over $500,000 in work. And there were inconsistencies. Paperwork that didn't match up. Licensing that hadn't been renewed properly. A building that reported safety issues just weeks after their work was completed. I didn't want to look deeper. Not really. But a voice inside me said I had to. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. Their company had skipped inspections, cut corners, and even filed for a retroactive permit on a job that had already been completed, a violation of city code. Some of their employees weren't even properly certified. This wasn't just bad business. It was negligence. I didn't tell anyone right away. I didn't want it to be personal. But I couldn't walk away either. If it had been anyone else's name on those papers, I would have kept going. So why should they get a pass just because they shared my blood? I gathered the documents. I submitted my findings to the editor. I didn't sign my name. I stayed in the background. Let the senior reporter, Will, a gruff but fair man in his 40s, take the lead. I just gave him everything I had. 2 months later, the story ran. City contractor under investigation for violations of public safety code. It hit Pittsburgh like a brick through glass. The morning the story broke, I sat in the student newsroom with a cup of lukewarm coffee, watching the buzz unfold across social media. The headline had made the rounds fast, retweeted by city watchdog accounts, shared in community Facebook groups, and even picked up by a regional news station by noon. There was no mention of me anywhere in the byline, which was exactly how I wanted it. I stared at the screen, numb. Even though I knew what I had handed over, I hadn't anticipated how quickly the backlash would come. Anonymous sources from within the city office came forward, confirming shortcuts, backroom handshakes, and incomplete work orders. A whistleblower from another contracting firm accused the city of playing favorites. And in the middle of it all were the names Keith and Trent Hathaway, printed in bold in paragraph 3. It was surreal, watching your family become the center of a controversy, knowing you'd lit the first match. By the end of the week, their company was suspended from bidding on new city contracts pending an investigation. That meant no income from their biggest client, no cash flow, and likely, a lot of panic. And still, I heard nothing from them. No call. No email. Not even a vague, accusatory message. I should have felt relieved. Instead, I felt sick. I told no one about my connection to the story, not my friends, not my roommates, not even Will, who assumed I was just a kid with a nose for details. I buried myself in classwork and extra shifts at the paper. My stomach turned every time my phone buzzed, but it was never them. Until one night. It was almost midnight. I had just come back from a late library shift and was reheating leftover pasta when my phone lit up. Unknown number. Voicemail. I hesitated before listening. It was my mother. Corinne. It's me. I just want to talk. Things have gotten out of hand here. You wouldn't believe what they're saying. Trent's been losing work, and your father, he's just trying to keep the house. I don't know what you've been hearing out there, but it's not true. We always tried to do right by you. I just don't understand why you've shut us out like this. There was a long pause before she added, almost bitterly, "You're still our daughter." I let the message play twice before deleting it. Something about the tone, this mixture of guilt, denial, and misplaced blame, made my stomach twist. She hadn't called to apologize. She had called to plead innocence. To rewrite the past. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. Not an email. A handwritten letter. My mom's cursive, sharp and slanted. She wrote 3 pages explaining how the money had been reallocated out of necessity, how they thought they were doing what was best for the family, and how disappointed they were that I had cut them out of my life. Not once in the entire letter did she acknowledge that what they did had been wrong. Not once did she say sorry. Near the end, she mentioned that Trent was thinking of selling part of the business to get ahead of the bad press. She said it like it was an unfortunate coincidence, like his downfall was some kind of accident they'd all just stumbled into. I didn't respond. The truth is, I didn't know how. I wasn't angry the way I had been when I first left home. Back then, I was consumed with rage, grief, betrayal. But now? I just felt done. Like a page had turned without me meaning to, and I couldn't go back to reread the chapter no matter how hard I tried. I wanted to feel something for them. I really did. But I had nothing left to give. Despite everything, I kept pushing forward. I entered my final year with a double major and a solid reputation in the journalism department. My professors trusted me with more serious pieces. One of them, a former New York Times columnist who had retired to teach, told me I had a spine for the tough stories. I took it as the highest compliment. My byline started appearing in local publications. I got accepted into a competitive mentorship program that paired me with a political journalist in D.C. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was becoming the thing I'd dreamed of being for years. And then, out of nowhere, I ran into someone from home. It happened at a conference in Philadelphia, a small gathering for journalism students. I was grabbing a free sandwich from the catering table when I heard someone call my name. Corinne Hathaway? I turned, and my breath caught. It was Kendra Mill, a girl I had gone to high school with. She'd been in Trent's year, kind of popular, known mostly for her dramatic eyeliner and for dating a series of older guys who had trucks and bad tattoos. I barely remembered her. But she remembered me. I saw your name on the list, she said. Didn't think it could be Corinne Hathaway. You look totally different. I smiled awkwardly. Yeah, it's been a while. She tilted her head. Hey. Was that article about your dad's company you? Someone back home said it was. That you were the whistleblower. My chest tightened. No idea what you're talking about. She stared for a second too long, then gave a little shrug. Well, whatever. People are saying he's done. Can't get a contract to save his life. Your mom's been telling people he might sell the house. I didn't respond. Just nodded and said I had to get back to a panel. But my hands were shaking when I picked up my notebook. It's one thing to walk away from your past. It's another to see it unravel in real time, knowing you lit the match and can't stop the burn. For weeks after running into Kendra, I couldn't stop thinking about what she said. That people knew. Those rumors had spread back home. That my family name, once whispered with that forced middle-class pride reserved for people who own small businesses, was now being passed around for something entirely different. I wasn't sure what disturbed me more, that my actions had become a small-town story, or that I might one day end up in the same room with one of those stories staring back at me in the form of a familiar face. I told myself it didn't matter. That I was free now. That I'd earned my independence. But it did matter. I knew it because I started having dreams again, old ones. Back in the house on Elmwood Drive. Sitting at the kitchen table where my mom would peel potatoes, and my dad would read the obituaries like it was sports commentary. Only now, in the dream, they were silent. Just staring at me while I told them everything they didn't want to hear. One afternoon, I got a message that made my stomach lurch. It wasn't a voicemail this time. Not a letter. Just a simple, bland email. Subject line, talk? It was from Trent. I stared at it for 10 minutes, cursor hovering over the trash icon. But I didn't delete it. Instead, I opened it. Hey Corinne, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I'm reaching out anyway. Things have been rough. The article really messed things up for us. I know you had something to do with it. Mom thinks you're trying to destroy the family, but I don't think that. I think maybe you just snapped. I'm not saying what we did was right. I didn't even know Mom gave me that money until after it was done. I just assumed it came from somewhere else. She told me it was her savings. Anyway, I'm not looking for forgiveness. But maybe you can stop hating me. I'm not the enemy you think I am. If you ever want to talk, I'm around. There was no signature. No contact number. Just that quiet little grenade, dropped into my inbox like an afterthought. I didn't reply. But it stuck with me. The way he said, "I'm not the enemy you think I am." Like I'd spent my whole life misreading him, misreading the favoritism, the jabs, the way he'd stand by while our parents cut me down. I remembered when I was 13 and had just won a writing contest at school. I came home grinning, holding the certificate like it was gold, and Trent laughed. Not mean-spirited. Just casually cruel, like boys sometimes are. Who cares? It's just a dumb essay. Nobody's paying you to write stories. I was 13. And I believed him. For years after that, I questioned every word I put on paper. But now I was the one getting paid. The one people listened to. And he was trying to pick up the pieces of a legacy built on handouts and hollow praise. Still, something in that message rang differently. Like maybe for the first time, Trent wasn't speaking from above me, but from below. Like he'd finally felt what it was like to fall without a safety net. I didn't reply. Not then. I told myself I didn't owe him closure. That I didn't owe any of them anything. But in quiet moments, I wondered what he thought snapping looked like. Did he think I'd published that story out of revenge? Out of spite? The truth was, I hadn't done it for them or against them. I'd done it because it was a story that mattered. Because if someone else had been in my shoes, if some other young reporter had sat on evidence out of fear or shame or misplaced loyalty, it would have been a disservice to everything we're taught to value as journalists. As adults. As people. Still, as my final semester crawled toward graduation, a part of me couldn't help but feel unfinished. I'd told myself this journey was about escape. About making it out. But as I watched classmates hug their families during Parents' Weekend, or pose with their siblings under the college arch, I realized I wasn't just running from something, I was carrying it. Every day. My professor once told us, you can't report on the world until you've reported on yourself. And I didn't know how to finish my story until I understood where I stood in theirs. So I made a choice. Not to forgive. Not yet. But to confront. I took a train home 2 weeks before graduation. Didn't tell anyone I was coming. I wasn't sure what I was hoping for. I didn't have a plan. I just knew I couldn't keep living with this open loop. When I got off the train in Pittsburgh, everything felt smaller. The buildings, the cars, the streets. Or maybe it was just me who had grown. I hadn't been home in 4 years. I took the local bus to Elmwood Drive. The front porch still wasn't fixed. When I knocked on the door, there was silence. Then a slow shuffle. Then it opened. And there was my mother, hair grayer, face thinner, but with the same look she always wore when something didn't go her way, like she was preparing to fight but hoping she wouldn't have to. "Corinne," she said. I didn't think, "I'm not here to stay," I cut in. She nodded, stepped aside, and let me in. The house smelled the same. Laundry detergent and dust and something faintly burnt, like overcooked meatloaf. Trent was there. Sitting at the kitchen table. His eyes met mine, and for once, he didn't look smug. Just tired. I didn't sit. "I'm graduating in 2 weeks," I said. "Northwestern. Honors." Mom pressed her lips together. Trent looked down. "I came here to tell you something," I said, my voice steady. "What you did, the way you all treated me, it didn't break me. But it made it harder. Colder. I've had to unlearn that. Every day." Trent opened his mouth, but I kept going. You took what wasn't yours. And you thought I'd come crawling back. You thought you were saving me from failure. But the truth is, you were scared of what would happen if I succeeded. No one spoke. Not even a breath. And that's when I realized. They had no idea what to say. Not because they didn't care, but because deep down, they knew I was right. I didn't wait for them to speak. I'd said what I came to say. Anything they could respond with, apologies, excuses, gaslighting, it didn't matter. The power I had given them growing up, the pedestal they'd stood on in my mind, was gone. And for the first time in my life, I was standing in that living room not as the girl they underestimated, but as the woman they no longer recognized. I'm leaving, I said simply, and turned for the door. Corinne, wait, Trent's voice broke through. I paused with my hand on the doorknob. His face was worn, guilt carved into the lines of his expression, like he'd spent the last few months aging under the weight of his own silence. I didn't know about the money. Not at first, he said quietly. When I found out, I didn't stop it either. I just took what I thought I was owed. You were never owed anything, I said without turning around. You were just given everything because no one ever made you earn it. The silence that followed said everything. I left without another word. Graduation came 2 weeks later. My name was read in front of hundreds. I wore my cap and gown like armor, the golden honors cord wrapped proudly around my neck. A few of my professors hugged me. A few others gave me knowing smiles. They had no idea what I'd walked through to get there, but they saw what I'd become. That was enough. The next part of my life started quickly. Thanks to the connections I made at the paper and through the mentorship in D.C., I was offered a junior investigative reporting position at a well-known Midwest media outlet. It wasn't glamorous, long hours, tight deadlines, but I loved every gritty, honest second of it. Within a year, I published a piece exposing how a city zoning board was greenlighting unsafe housing developments in exchange for campaign contributions. It made waves. My name started showing up in journalism circles. I was building something real, and this time I was doing it on my own terms. But I hadn't forgotten what they did. Or what they tried to take from me. The revenge part came slowly. Quietly. And with surgical precision. It started when I launched a side project, a podcast called Built on Sand. The premise was simple: exposing corruption, nepotism, and favoritism in small-town America. I used real stories, some submitted anonymously, some gathered through old contacts and open records. In one episode, titled The Heat Beneath the Floorboards, I detailed a case about a family-run HVAC business in western Pennsylvania that had received public contracts despite numerous code violations. I changed the names. I changed just enough of the locations and dates. But anyone from our town would know exactly who it was. It gained traction. Enough that people back home were listening. Enough that it made my parents and Trent deeply uncomfortable, judging by the sudden wave of silence that followed after months of occasional, tepid outreach. I didn't need to name them. Their guilt filled in the blanks. Then, one of the regional contractors who had been underbid by my father's company emailed me after the podcast aired. Said he'd suspected fraud for years, and my reporting finally gave him the confidence to take them to civil court. He asked if I'd be willing to submit my findings as evidence. I said yes. They settled out of court. Quietly, of course. But not without damage. The company, Hathaway Mechanical, shut down within a year. Not because of my reporting directly, but because the trust was gone. The clients dried up. The reputation never recovered. Word travels fast in tight-knit towns, especially when those words come with documentation, audio, and public records attached. Trent ended up working for another HVAC company. He wasn't the boss anymore. My parents sold the house. Rumor had it they downsized to a small rental in a neighboring town. I didn't confirm it. I didn't care. But the final touch, the most satisfying piece, came a year later, when Northwestern Magazine did a feature on rising stars in journalism and included me. They interviewed me in my apartment. Took pictures of me sitting at my desk, surrounded by clippings of the stories I'd broken. The piece painted me as a survivor, a scrappy journalist who fought her way through adversity to become someone worth watching. When they asked about my past, I was honest, but careful. My family didn't support my path, I said. They thought I wasn't college material. Turns out they were wrong. That quote ran in print. A glossy, beautiful spread. I know my mother saw it. A mutual old neighbor of ours posted it on Facebook with a congratulatory caption. Comments flooded in. One, from someone we both knew, read, "Corinne always had it in her. Some people just couldn't see it." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. My revenge didn't come in one explosive moment. It came through the slow, steady build of a life they said I could never have. It came in the truth, told plainly, without cruelty, but with clarity. I didn't destroy them. I simply stepped out from beneath their shadow and let their own actions do the rest. And I never looked back.